Hi everybody, and happy Tuesday. That means it's time for this week's video. Get ready. Well, I was thinking about something that happened a long time ago. I think probably about 8 years ago. I met a guy who was doing some work on my parents' house, and he brought his wife over and his little girl, and we were having lunch at my parents', and somehow I got invited to go to their church on Sunday, and somehow I let my mother volunteer me to go, and so I went. And while I was at their church and the pastor was preaching, during a moment in his sermon, he said that our number one responsibility is to preach the gospel to this dying world. They said they are lost and on their way to hell and don't know it, and they need to hear the gospel. And I just sat there patiently waiting for that service to end. And it finally ended. And then I was invited over to their house. We had a small lunch, and I asked this guy, I said, "Do you know that the gospel means good news?" He said, "Yeah, I know that." I said, "Do you know if it's good news, then it's only good news? It can't be good news mixed with some really bad news?" He's like, "Well, what are you talking about? Of course." I said, "Well, the gospel that was just described in the pastor's sermon today, that was some scary stuff. And he was describing that as the gospel, going out telling people that they are on their way to hell, unless, of course, they believe in Jesus, accept him, and then live for him. And that's scary news. That's bad news." And he's like, "Well, the good news is if they accept Jesus, then they're going to go to heaven." And I'm like, "But the bad news is if they don't, they're going to go to a place called hell." He's like, "No, the good news is accept Jesus." And I was like, "Man, you can't have any bad news in the good news." He said, "Well, what's the bad news?" And I'm like, "I just told you. Bad news is thinking that there's millions of people out there going to hell. And that's why that's not good news, and that's why it can't be the gospel. Because the gospel truly is good news, that the Savior of the world came and completely reversed the death and condemnation of Adam. Because, like we've said over and over, according to what Paul said in Romans chapter 5, by what one man did, Adam, everyone was condemned. Everyone was in a state of spiritual death, even though they were alive and kicking. But by one man's obedience, Jesus Christ, all who were dead in that Adam, that first Adam, were raised to justification of life. Everyone. Everyone was raised to righteousness and justification of life. There's no bad news in the good news, because there's nobody on their way to hell. What Jesus did for one, he did for all, and requiring somebody to accept and believe and obey and live for is not the gospel. He still, by the end of that conversation, kept asking, "So what's the bad news?" I just couldn't believe how blind he was to the fact that their idea of the gospel was full of bad news. It's amazing. It's revolutionary. Have a revolutionary week.